With a new installment of Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows right around the corner, it's time for a little refresher course. What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. On this week's weekly one-shot, I'm going to be talking about Renew Your Vows. Not just the new series, because I'm going to do a little bit of remedial work on Renew Your Vows, the original series that happened during Secret War. Renew Your Vows was originally a one-shot story that was based off of Secret Wars and was a Battleworld realm that was held by the Regent and called the Regency. Later on, what we did was we determined that this was a parallel universe that really should have been fleshed out a little bit more, which is why we're getting the new series. This is designated as Earth 18119, and it's a situation where the events of One More Day, where Mary Jane and Peter, split up, they don't really exist. So, in this reality, Mary Jane and Peter Parker are still married. They have a daughter named Annie, and he is still a photographer for the Daily Bugle. Late one night, Spider-Man's called into the Avengers Tower, and they are going to be facing an opposition that they hadn't really imagined before. And what we find out is that it is Regent, and Regent has been collecting superpowers, and we actually saw a little bit more of this in the current Amazing Spider-Man run. But the important thing is that they need everybody on hand so that way they can defeat Regent and reclaim the superheroes that have been basically taken from them and maintain order inside the world. However, Spider-Man has a different thing in mind. With his inability to call Mary Jane and Annie, he rushes back to his apartment only to find Eddie Brock's Venom holding them hostage. So this immediately sends Peter into a feral rage. As a father protecting his family, he goes in and just buries a punch into Venom so hard that it's probably the hardest one he's ever thrown. This spills out onto the streets as Annie and MJ escape, ultimately ends up in a fiery finale where Spider-Man lures Eddie Brock's Venom into a building that's burning and abandoned on its own, and he brings the house down on him. This is a much more violent and visceral Spider-Man that leaves Eddie Brock in the steaming rubble to die. So this is a very serious change for Peter. But what we do find is that there is some semblance of that good Peter Parker still in there, because he is haunted by this decision that he's made. The fact that he defended his family at the life of another, the expense of a life of another, is absolutely ridiculous to him. It's abhorrent. He is distraught every single time. And we also find that there are certain nightmares that are causing Annie, who's now grown up, we're in the future world, to basically accidentally use her now burgeoning spider powers. So we find her crawled and balled up onto the ceiling where she's having her bad dream and has to be reclaimed by her father, crawling up there and grabbing her as well. Because Annie and her father are some of the few superpowered individuals left, they have to use what are called inhibitor chips on custom-designed bracelets that Peter has made, showing that he is still a genius. However, he doesn't really have much for fun, so he's kind of stuck hunting down blood money kind of pictures for events that have happened between Regent's forces and the general populace in order to not run them and kind of dissuade public opinion from Augustus Roman, who's Regent. One day while passing off these pictures to J. Jonah Jameson, Peter hears about a confrontation that's going down at Annie's school and immediately leaps into action, leading everyone to know that Spider-Man is back in town. But what he's going to do is just save the day anyway, because he's Peter Parker and he has a responsibility as Spider-Man. The impression that he leaves on his daughter is absolutely amazing, and the fact that he has these powers and uses them for good is something that's going to sit with her for the rest of this book. After his initial confrontation with characters like the Rhino, he goes home and has to don his famous black costume, a source of nightmares for Annie, but ultimately it's his necessary guise in order to go out and get the parts that he needs to replace the inhibitor chips that have been fried in this confrontation. So he goes and he finds himself betrayed by the Tinkerer, the person that has been supplying him with this black market tech, only to be confronted by the Sinister Six. So the first person to confront Peter Parker is going to be Dr. Octopus, and we see that much more brutal side of Spider-Man come out again, as he literally rips Dr. Octopus limb from limb, knowing that these metal arms that he's integrated into himself are linked directly to his brain, causing immense amounts of pain. It's a little brutal for Spider-Man. As the rest of the Sinister Six shows up to reclaim what's left of Dr. Octopus, Kraven is immediately the one that notices the confrontation and why that is. He's fighting like a man possessed. He is after something, and that has to be the protection of his family, a father defending his cub, in Kraven's own words. And that leads them to create a city-wide, basically a battle worldwide scan of everybody, all their families. They've got to report to their local agencies. And when a mutant child sets off the detector after successfully passing through, Peter Parker, with the encouragement of Mary Jane and his daughter Annie, leaps into action as Spider-Man. And he webs one of the bombs of Hobgoblin right to his hand, which leads to another kind of brutal accident. Spider-Man's not a funny guy anymore. He is ferocious. However, as all that commotion's going on, Annie and MJ are grabbed and whisked away through a portal as Sandman, who's now an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Spider-Man get captured and brought into Regent's laboratory. At that point in time, we see the remains of D-Man on his surgery table and the collection of superheroes that Regent has been pulling his powers from, and it is vast. As Sandman slowly withers away inside of his cell, a portal is revealed from inside of him that was created by the Spot, and that's going to allow S.H.I.E.L.D. to jump into Regent's laboratory and take the man down, which is a good thing because it is currently under attack by the Sinister Six. And at this point in time, we actually see Annie enter into a little bit of combat, and she's not afraid to give up a low blow. You know, she is quite the little fierce fighter of her own right. Annie and MJ then jump through the portal, and it leads to the final confrontation between Spider-Man, Annie, MJ, and Regent. And the reason that we get to this is because MJ basically lets Annie loose. It's just like, my daughter is going to kick your ass. And she does. She whoops on the assistant of Regent, and then MJ dons the power armor. And that's going to be the important thing that we're going to have to take from this regarding the next iteration of Renew Your Vows, which is coming up next month, is that power armor is going to be key to the way things develop. We conclude the story with Peter basically getting into his feral kind of rage, realizing that he has to protect his family, busting out of his cell, and then knocking Regent out of the entire tower. Finally, Annie comes barreling down behind him, sticking the inhibitor arrow that was developed by Hawkeye into his neck, and taking away the ability for Regent to use any of the powers that are instituted by his biometrics. And that's where we see the final conclusion. Peter, with a sharpened, pointed stick, ready to stab Regent, reclaims a little bit of his humanity, knocks him out, and saves the day. And that's where we finalize Renew Your Vows. But that's just the end of that particular story and the beginning of this new world that's going to be coming out from Gerry, Conway, and Ryan Stegman. So what we saw in a preview is that MJ's suit is really an adapted version of the Regent power armor. Peter Parker, since he is a genius, adapted that technology into the new suit, and what that allows MJ to do is to tap into Spider-Man's superpowers at will. The thing is, since he is kind of contributing these things to her and her power armor, he feels those, and we don't necessarily know what the effects are, because Regent's original technology had the ability to kind of drain people. They were like a battery that was, you know, they would start out high and then they would end up low on charge, and there was no real way to recharge them eventually. If we're going to concentrate on MJ's powers, they basically are Spider-Man's physical prowess kind of powers, since Regent's armor had energy users, it had telepaths, and he had the ability to use all of these powers inside his technology. When it comes to the spider powers she can tap into, there's the enhanced physiology. That's going to allow her to basically have a healing factor, and it also enhances her normal senses, basically correcting any possible defects in her eyesight and other things like that. She also has the ability to crawl up walls, which is a signature Spider-Man trait. She also has the enhanced strength and durability of Spider-Man, allowing her to lift up to 10 tons. Then there's the superhuman reflexes and agility that, combined with the all-important spider sense, allow Peter Parker as Spider-Man to be almost unhittable. The one thing that we have to remember, though, is that these powers were also dampened after one more day. They were a situation where this might be the most powerful version of Spider-Man, 20, 25 tons, superior amounts of strength. This could be Spider-Man at his best, and that's going to allow Mary Jane to operate on that same level or a similar level for a little bit longer. We don't necessarily know that, and there could be more things that are incorporated. We know for a fact that the web shooters are going to have to be incorporated because we've seen art of her swinging around town, and it's technology, so it doesn't matter. It's not necessarily an ingrained spider sense. But what we're going to be seeing is how much of a limit Peter Parker has when he contributes these powers to Mary Jane, and how that's going to impact everything when they're in the heat of the battle. So that's a little bit of a refresher course on Renew Your Vows, as well as a breakdown of MJ and her powers as they relate to her new Regent power suit. But I want to know if you guys have any questions about that, and have any kind of theories as to where things are going in that storyline. As always, if you like what you see, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.